Good evening, everybody. Welcome to welcome to our session, which has sometimes been called Hispanic Music, Present and Future. It's sometimes been called Latin Music, Past and Future. These sometimes have to do with various email threads that have been going around between us for the last couple of weeks. I'm very excited to be here with this great panel of very interesting and exciting and engaging folks from various aspects of the music industry. My name is Chris Stover. I teach music theory and composition and, in big giant quotes, world music at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music. And I will be saying a few words at the beginning here. There may be an occasional word here and there, but I'm going to let these folks over here do most of the talking today. But I thought I would start off just by introducing everybody from, excuse me, let me find my notes here. From my left, Bobby Sanabria.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Aurora Flores. Sandra Velasquez. And Yuzzy Acosta. And as I've been thinking about what we might want to be talking about today, making maybe a few assumptions, but also picking everybody's brains about some possible topics, I've been thinking about some common threads between the activities that my colleagues up here have been engaged in over the years, and particularly thinking about roles of musicians as historians and as educators and as activists and as advocates and as, to steal a word from Bobby's bio, multicultural warriors. And I thought that might be kind of an interesting place to begin. I have a bunch of notes here, but I'm going to jump right to my question, which is, to what degree should an artist be a responsible and engaged advocate, activist, historian, educator, multicultural warrior? And a follow-up question to that might be, to what degree is that more important when we are musicians who are representing different kinds of marginalized musics or different kinds of so-called non-mainstream musics, such as Latin American music? And I think I'll just open that up.
Big question. I'll kick off the conversation by saying I think when you say to what extent an artist should be involved, I think that totally depends on the artist and how honest, how real, how compelling their music and their messages. I mean, aside from being an artist, I've interviewed many artists. So I've interviewed the artists, let's say, who you look at an artist like Benny Moré, who was a top singer of Cuba. So he represented Cuban music, he represented singers, he represented black Cubans. But to a certain point, he himself was a bon vivant, and he loved singing, and he loved just being anywhere to sing and entertain. Entertain was what he lived for. And I think, but there was such honesty that came through in that. And I think before, traditionally, some artists have taken an activist role, a total activist role, and some artists just by dint of their music, the strength of their music, of their message, who they are, where they come from, have a more maybe not as active activist role, but they're activists in what they represent. So I think it all depends. I mean, it depends on the artists and what they put out there. There are some artists who've made their whole careers with protest music, like a Bob Dylan, you know. I remember Daniel Santos did a CD in the 50s with Davilita, all protest music against the U.S. and what they were doing with the bombings, not in Vieques, in the Mona Island back then. Mm-hmm. So it depends, I think, on the artist and the extent of their activism, whether it's political poetry and lyrics, whether you're an artist and you're a woman and you go against everything that they say women should be. I think it depends on the artist.
Would you like me to go this? First of all, I'd like to say thank you for Chris for inviting me and all my fellow panelists, and thank you for all for coming. I can address this topic firsthand because I've been involved in activism, not by my own choice, but by the fact that I have always believed that the artist, and anyone in particular who isn't a performer, has a moral obligation to speak out and say something when they feel something is wrong, as we did when WBGO, unfortunately, many years ago, took away the Latin Jazz Cruise, which was a program that specifically was devoted 2 hours a week to that genre of music. And we organized, we protested, we got some local politicians involved, like Sandra Velasquez from the Bronx and Congressman Jose Serrano. Brenda Feliciano, the great opera singer who's here tonight, helped out greatly. Her husband, Paquito de Rivera, also, and many people, on the scene protested, and we were very successful because not only did we bring the show back, but now WBGO, since those days, has incorporated that genre of music consistently throughout all of their programming 24 hours a day, because the people spoke up and said, we love this music, we want it. Latin jazz has been marginalized. And then the second aspect.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I wrote an article in the Village Voice on that.
Yeah.
The day the Claves stopped.
Yeah.
And they brought her show back on.
Yeah, and so it just goes to show you that protest really comes first. It begins with one thing: anger. So I meet a lot of my colleagues in the jazz world, in the Latin jazz world, that always are complaining. I said, well, what are you going to do about what your complaints are about? When the Grammys cut some 31 categories, 80% of them represented ethnic and racially grounded forms of music, we protested. It wasn't just me, but I was the one making a lot of phone calls and people in the middle of the night, et cetera, et cetera.
It was a national protest.
Yeah, it was international in many ways too, because people from all over the world. It was just a simple thing. We performed at the Apollo Theater. We headlined a couple of years ago with my big band, and in the middle of the concert, I told within 15 seconds, I told what the audience would happen. Many didn't know. I said, well, somebody yelled out, what do we do? I said, write to Neil Portnoy, Neil at Grammy.com, the president of the Grammys. It just takes that. It just takes that. It's your right as a citizen of this country. You have a moral obligation to say something when something is wrong. By the very nature of the music that I play, jazz and Latin jazz, the music in and of itself is a form of protest, because jazz represents basically one thing: freedom. And that's why, and democracy. The individual on stage gets to perform as a soloist within the democratic format of the bandstand. So it best represents what we are as Americans. It represents the best of what we are as Americans. So I tell my students here at the New School, and it's a very momentous year for me this year, because this is the 20th year I teach at this institution. From the very first day that I've taught here, I've told my students, you are warriors for this music. You don't realize it now because you're young, and many of you are not socio-politically aware yet. But I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and we were very socially, politically aware because of the Vietnam War, because of the Civil Rights Movement, because of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, etc. So every time I perform, I'm making a statement for the music, whether the musicians on the stage with me know it or not. And that statement is that this culture and this music exists. And I would say that rock and roll, pop, and certain forms of pop music, well, they all do that in a certain way, but I think jazz does it the most. Rock was an expression of young people, especially white kids down south, loving black music and saying screw the system and the adults that tell us we can't listen to this
But it was
music.
part of the counterculture. So a lot of it was protest.
Exactly. So, you know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's all protest music. It's all, even, you know, Mozart, Beethoven, etc. In their cases, it's about love, human emotion, beauty, etc. And I have to quote the great Buddy Rich, who was probably the most phenomenal drummer that has ever lived in the history of jazz. He was very acerbic and very outspoken, and he was unfortunately also known for his incredible temper. But in an interview, he talked about music, what music is, and he said all it is basically is love. And what better message to get across, especially in these days? I think that's the best thing you can do. Protest hate, protest violence, protest with what? With love, and you know the best expression of that, other than intimacy on a physical level, is music. So, I hope my answer wasn't too long, but.
And that's many interesting points wrapped up in both of your
And
statements.
I think also, just to finish off,
Yeah.
education. We educate on stage. We teach while we're performing. We do. All of us do.
The historian, the jazz historian John Zwed, has a great line where he says that the political organization of the jazz band is a political organization that is scary to a lot of people because it hasn't been tried in society yet. And because it is a bunch of individuals coming together and celebrating their individuality in the service of the good of the whole.
Mm-hmm. And artists do that to a certain extent almost every day with the way they dress, the way they are. Even the younger ones today, there are political messages that they come out with.
My name is Sandra Velasquez. I'm here because I started a band called Pistolera, which means female gunslinger. And we kind of got branded as a political band just by accident because, well, not by accident, but I grew up in San Diego on the border, so a lot of my songs have political overtones, but I don't actually feel that being a Latin musician necessitates writing political music or being an activist. For me, as a songwriter, it's really about the commitment to being a songwriter and being true to the song and being honest and having a real message in the song. So, you know, the very first music video we made was for a song called Cazador, which is about the Minutemen Project, the racist civilian group that patrols the border. So, you know, my manager said, you know, if you put this out, you're going to be branded as a political band. You realize that? And I said, yeah, well, oh well, too bad, you know. So I guess I would just say that for me, there's nothing about being a Latin musician that says you have to be a political musician or you have to sing protest music. But definitely, you know, if you belong to a minority, you will probably have some kind of experience that will come out in your music that does have some kind of political overtones just by, you know, in my case, growing up on the border, you know, to Mexican parents.
Yeah, and on my side, I mean, part of my career started working with punk rock bands. And I had a band from Argentina called Todos Tus Muertos. And I remember most of the lyrics and most of their statements were political, and they were always getting arrested, they were always getting in trouble. They were, you know, complaining about everything that was going on, but most of the headlines, I remember that one of them was like, at the Los Angeles Times, it said something like, anger needs no translation. Because, I mean, you could tell that these guys were totally pissed off when they were singing, and that would make people curious as to what was it that they were complaining about. But I do agree with you as well, that, you know, in the context of Latin music that we're speaking of, music is about connecting to at least one person. If you connect with one person, then you made it, as far as I'm concerned. So it's not everything has to have a message, but everything does have to have a connection. You do have to try to connect. And I think that there is a lot of things going on, and most of, aside from salsa and jazz and all these things, people mostly focus about, you know, the love songs and I love you and whatever. There's more things to say about that, and it is important in the context of the world that we're living in to really have something to say that matters. But more than actually having a message and being complaining about the government and this and that, I think is more about connecting us to the day of today of what is going about, because as human beings, what we are doing in this earth is basically trying to connect to someone and feeling understood. So if you actually, can compile that into what you're trying to project as a musician, then I think that should be your focus as to trying to make an impact in the world that we're living in.
Absolutely. And I would consider everything that you just said to be examples of activism on a level as well. Activism doesn't have to be overtly political. It doesn't, and a political, a political move doesn't have to do with complaining about something. Every interhuman connection is a political engagement in some way. And if you are reaching out, if you're performing and you do connect with one person in the audience, that is an activist move. You're making a convert.
I'm being political now.
I agree with you totally. I mean, I think sometimes what's happening with Latin music today, I think it's revolutionary when I see younger women and they're leading their own bands and they're writing their own songs and they're not dressing like the conservative Latino. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, if you wanted to do anything in music and you were a woman, it was you were a singer and you had to look like the hot hoochie mama singer in front of the band.
That's still kind of true. It's still kind of happening.
It's still, yeah, but I see women breaking out of that. I really do. And I find that is, or even doing things with the music, making it more rock, more punk in terms of the salsa, taking it in different directions. I think the whole rock en español trend is just amazing. And I think all of those things they're revolutionary and they make a mark and they're milestones.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not call it rock en español, please. Because that makes an emphasis in language and not in the music. And I think that's important.
Yeah, it's not like they were taking rock, classic rock songs and doing it in Spanish, which I always thought was corny. This was something completely different, original tunes, doing it in their own style. It's just, and then you have the other side, like someone like a Ruben Blades, who in salsa, even though there was always protests in Latin music, but in salsa at that time, everything was, come on, hot mama, let's dance. And here he comes out with, ella era una chica plática, and he's talking about society and the materialism. And he took it even further and went and represented the Latino in Latin America, the wars that were going on, the political upheaval. So you have these extremes, but I think what comes through, like I said before, is having a message that's honest to yourself. If that's what you believe in, I have a tune that I wrote about domestic violence that's bilingual. And it's about domestic violence, and I get heavy into it. But the music is all danceable. Mm-hmm. You could dance to it. But there's a message in there. And, women, I think that's one of the biggest protests out there. We still have a long way to go.
And that's a great point too. That's what Chico Buarque would do in Brazil, or what Bob Dylan would do in New York, or what Ruben Blades would do is attach a socially conscious message to a groovy tune.
Exactly.
And suddenly it's interesting to a lot of people, and you don't have to, you don't even have, you can listen to it on so many different levels at that point. Mm-hmm. There's multiple levels of engagement. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about, following up on our conversation earlier, or our email conversation, and this is for everybody too, but talk about kind of the role of the history of some of these kinds of musics as they're constituting what's going on now, and as they're pointing toward what kinds of things are on the horizon in the future. Like this maybe comes back to my first question a little bit of our roles, as we kind of all focused on the activist part of the question, but what about the historian part of the question? What about the educator part of the question? The role of taking all this stuff that's been going on, so much of it in so many different ways, for so many different reasons, by so many different people in so many different places, and how those things are being synthesized in different kinds of ways and pointing toward new directions.
I think we live right now, we especially in New York City, we live in a very exciting time period, because before, when I was growing up in the South Bronx, is in terms of the Hispanic community, you see Puerto Ricanos, a few Cubans, a few Dominicans maybe, and so the music was informed by those cultures. But now and that doesn't mean to say that there weren't Colombians or Ecuadorians, et cetera, at that time, because my high school sweetheart was Ecuadorian. I mean, I thought she was from the Philippines or something, and she goes to me, "I'm from Ecuador," and I go, "What?" So those cultures, the cultures of South and Central America, are really coming to the forefront here in New York City in various ways, in all different genres of Latin music. So what is it? We have 21, 22 countries in Latin America. So all those voices are starting to be heard, and they're starting to be expressed, obviously in the food, the dance, etc. But the music. And you have, and from the jazz perspective, you have great things happening with various groups here. Pedro Gerardo, and others that are doing things with Argentinian music, people that are doing the group Folklore Urbano, who's doing things with Colombian rhythms and jazz, and many others. It's always good when Paquito de Rivera, when June comes around, because I'm a Gemini, Paquito's a Gemini, Brenda's a Gemini, and they have always a party for us, or anybody who is a Gemini. And when you go to Paquito de Rivera's house, you see all of those 22 countries represented musically, because it's a big soiree. So you have somebody that plays bagpipes from Galicia there playing. You see somebody who plays Argentinian style tango violin. It's ridiculous. So we live in a very, very exciting time period right now. The sad thing is that we have less infrastructure for us as performers to play. There's just not enough venues, clubs to perform in. If we talk about salsa, if you would have asked me in 1973 when the Fania All-Stars played at Yankee Stadium for over 40,000, mostly Puerto Ricanos, you would ask me back then, "Hey, Bobby, what do you think is going to happen in 2013? I go, "Oh man, Latin culture and this music is going to be ubiquitous all over not only New York, but all over the world."
We all thought that.
Yeah. And Aurora was, I think, at that time, were you working as a reporter?
I was with Latin New York. I was just started.
So,
and we all thought that it was the Latin explosion.
Yeah. So now we have more Latinos in New York City than in any other time period, more Latinos in this country, but our music, our culture, is less heard and seen.
Yes.
So that's the irony that it's like a cruel joke in a Twilight Zone episode, So that's something that concerns me greatly. All the time I talk about it with my wife. I mean, it's like, damn. I thought when people like George Lopez had his mainstream TV show at night, I said, wow, I know he's going to book some stuff of the culture on the show. And what do we see almost every night? Stuff that represents youth culture, hip hop, pop music, etc. Nothing wrong with that. But I said to myself, wow, this guy has a platform. He's not using it. Now,
I was on my telly one time.
Yeah,
they were bad, and he played guitar with them.
Yeah. And he had Mark Anthony one night with Jennifer Lopez. But I looked at the show on a consistent basis, and I said,
No, I know.
wow, I thought this guy would have a mariachi group, an authentic mariachi group. And I said, wait a minute, man. I saw Linda Ronstadt play authentic mariachi music at the Grammys years ago. Something's wrong with this equation. So these are things that have to be brought up as artists. And then it gets back to the thing about protest and asking questions. Asking questions is also a form of social protest and advocacy, So
But you teach a lot. You are teaching a new generation of
from the jazz,
students.
from the jazz perspective.
Yeah, and you're teaching them jazz, and I mean, there's some people their age that have never even heard a live orchestra like that, the way you have.
Yeah, and part of it is we don't just do Afro-Cuban rhythms. We do things from Central and South America, Puerto Rico, etc. So education is important, but I think we need advocacy in mainstream TV and radio so this culture that is here, it's not going to go away, because we're not going to go away, gets out there more and gets recognized because it's something that just concerns me. I don't know how the other panelists feel about it, but
I was raised in California, and I didn't meet my first Puerto Rican until I was an adult. So I grew up with Mexican music, Chicano music,
Yeah.
you know. So for me, all of that is very new. I come from a different history, a different sound, son jarocho, banda, ranchera, cumbia from Colombia. You know, it's very popular in Mexico. So, you know, for me, that was my history. It's different. And it certainly informed the sound of Pistolera, but it was more of out of nostalgia for me because I moved to New York and was in culture shock because there were no Chicanos, and I felt like the only person who was Mexican American. So I kind of started Pistolera out of that longing for that border sound, and so it's a little different for me.
But don't you feel you're educating your audience today on?
I mean, again, it was
music?
kind of like my answer from the previous question. I never set out to, I don't feel that I have a responsibility to be traditional or to keep playing certain rhythms or certain styles of music. It was more about being true to the sounds in my head. It's more about being true as a songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was just about, you know, I played the sounds that I wanted to hear, you know.
But you're educating your audience because that song alone, what was going on in the border, you bring that here. People here don't know what's going on.
Right. I guess it's more about the intention behind the action. It was not, I need to go out and educate the world on Chicano music and about what's happening at the border. It was more like, I'm really pissed off that this is happening. Let me write a song about it.
Yeah.
And then it starts from there. It starts from an emotion. It doesn't start from an idea of I need to go tell the world about Mexican American music or what's happening at
It's
the
a
border.
spiritual thing.
It just,
comes
you know,
from inside.
it's like people that write poems, they write what's on their mind, or you write a story, or, you know, for me, I do songs, you know.
On my side of things, because I basically have to be the artist developer, I'm on the other side of things. I do feel that that my role as a publicist it is to educate the writer and the media and educate him by telling him a story and engaging him as to what is going on. And I feel that's what I've been doing all these years. I do think that it's important. It's a never-ending job because I've heard of Latin booms in my own era. I mean, you have a little bit more years going on in you. But
no, every 10 years there's a Latin explosion.
Every 5 years, it's like, oh, the Latin boom and the Latin boom. I'm like, you know how many Latin booms I already lived through? It's like my head is gonna explode already.
Yeah.
It's just. There's always a Latin boom when somebody in the mainstream sort of realizes, oh, this is what's going on. There is no thing, I do have to tell you that you also have to go out of your comfort zone and kind of seek out things because there are out there. I have seen it. I see that a lot of the Anglo institutions like festivals and booking agents and institutions such as South by Southwest do want to include more music, not just in the salsa world, although in the world music area, there's, on the modern music area, as to everybody wants everybody to meet up, but if you're waiting for it to come to you, I mean, you're going to be waiting for a long, long time.
Sure.
There is information out there. If you seek it out now that we have this wonder called the internet, and you're going to find that there's tons of options. There's tons of fanzines. There's tons of magazines. There's tons of people interested in finding out what is it that you have to offer. But you do have to have something to offer that means something to them. So right now in the present, I am particularly working with an artist that is kind of like, in the middle line. He's in the Latin world, but he's also in the Anglo world. It's like a total mix in there. And of course, when things actually do have an impact, they have an impact in the Anglo world. And my role is basically kind of prepare myself to be rejected. We have to stop being afraid of being rejected and just take it and go, because the worst thing that can happen is they're going to tell you, you know what, I'm not interested in this crap. Mm-hmm. Please don't call me anymore. Mm-hmm. And then, the great thing that usually happens is like, you know what, send me this thing. Thank you for introducing me to this situation. Mm-hmm. But I think that it is important. Everybody, it doesn't, maybe George Lopez basically did not get, people were afraid to get to him and to his booking person, and that's why they were not the artists that you were looking for, were not booked in this place. But if you actually go to, you know, Jay Leno and you go to David Letterman or to Conan, I mean, I've had artists in those shows, and they were like, "We love your band. We cannot even pronounce it, but you know, we'll put it on." But just that you just have to reach. You have to do your job. You have to do your job.
Yeah, there has to be advocacy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would call it that, but it's just a matter of, you know, make a plan and craft a story, be present, say, you know, this is what I want to communicate, this is what I want to do. People are willing to listen. We live in a different time right now. We have access to things, but they're not going to come to you. You have to go and look for it, and you will find it.
I totally agree with you, and I think actually we're living in a time for the musicians. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle because I went through what the boom was, the salsa boom. It was called the salsa boom then. And it was all over. I mean, we even had a journalist came from England, John Storm Roberts, and wrote all about this salsa boom all over the country. And when I look at that, and back then there were so many clubs, you could go anywhere and go dancing. You went salsa dancing 7 days a week. Everybody knew how to do salsa, even the African-American guys. If you didn't Latin, you were not hip. But you know what? I think nowadays, I guess, having a different perspective, not and taking such a break from the music to be in marketing, corporate marketing, I think actually right now is a great opportunity for those artists to make their own opportunity, to get their own venues, to do their own shows and get out there. And I think a lot of times artists, you know, especially when you're an arranger and you're doing a lot of other things like educating, like you're a teacher and all that, you look at this mammoth thing and it's like, oh my God, now I have to go through this too. But it's not really that hard. I mean, it is putting a plan together, going out there, talking to people, and I think artists have more control of their work. Before, every artist was looking for that manager or that record label, and they're going to sign me, and I'm going to be famous. But they stole all their publishing. They stole so much from these artists.
Because they're not educated.
Exactly, because they weren't educated.
But
I think now is the time.
Because they have to stop being lazy and just kind of get educated and ask questions.
Well, what I'm saying, I think to me, it's a good time for a musician to really go out there, but they have to put those hats on. They have to go out there and do it. And I think they'll be able to carve out a niche or make an impact. But it's tough because it's different. There's different tools now than before. There's the internet. There's all these PDAs. There's all these things going on. But no one's going to do it for you. I've never seen, in the Latin music world, I've never seen a manager. I've seen a lot of booking agents, booking/drug dealer
It's not
agents.
true. There are managers.
But they're main managers.
There
I'm
are
talking about the
managers.
salsa world.
No, but even in the salsa world, because you know I was in that world as well.
Managers?
Yes.
Real managers?
There were managers, but most of, you know, and nothing to go down on you guys, but, you know, there was a lot of people. The idea, and this is not just in the salsa world, this is like in general, that there's this belief amongst musicians that basically you find a manager and he's there to basically do all your
This is what I'm saying.
That's not
true
the way
anymore.
it works.
Yeah.
Well,
Everybody was like, oh, my manager sucks because he didn't do all my, you know.
Yeah. Well,
bathroom.
that's the pop paradigm. I mean, I've dealt with managers before and booking agents and everything. I can only speak from my perspective as a jazz-oriented musician. When you call up, when you try to book something that's jazz-oriented on a major TV show that's out there, when you say the word jazz, it's like saying cancer. It's just, I'm telling you, that's just the way it is. If Wynn Marsalis can't get on David Letterman, he's only been on David Letterman the whole history of the Letterman show, like maybe twice, I think.
And he was with Sting.
You know, no, he was on once by himself, and the band kicked the audience gave him a standing ovation. It was like David Letterman was like, oh damn, you know, whatever. But you have to have advocacy. I can only speak again from my perspective growing up. When we had the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, we had the Merv Griffin Show, we had the David. Mike Douglas, and you had David Frost.
Yeah.
And each one of them had jazz. Mike Douglas had a small jazz combo. The other shows all had big jazz orchestra, full big bands on there. And they were, the hosts themselves were advocates for jazz. They were advocates for pop music too, because you saw everybody was on there, the Grateful Dead, whatever. But when Dizzy Gillespie was in town in Los Angeles, all he had to do was make a phone call, and Johnny Carson would say, sure, man. When Buddy Rich was in town, forget it. We don't have that kind of advocacy anymore. Anybody remember Saturday Night Live? Sun Ra was on Saturday Night Live. Chick Corea, Return to Forever, was on Saturday Night Live. Santana was on Saturday Night Live. It was Rahsaan Roland Kirk, when I was a kid, was on the Ed Sullivan Show. If you don't know who Rahsaan is, he's the guy that plays used to play 3 saxophones at the same time and a nose flute, playing avant-garde jazz. That does not exist. That does not exist anymore. For the jazz musician, if you knock on the door, they slam it in your face. The only person that has any ability to break that is a person that can be promoted as a pop star, Esperanza Spalding, because she's a vocalist. And when she was on Letterman, they told her, don't play acoustic bass, play the guitarrón type of bass, so it looks like you're
Electric
playing no, not even electric, like a guitar acoustic bass, so it looks like a guitar and this and that, and I can only speak from that side of things. I'll give you another example. We played at Jazz at Lincoln Center, my big band, my 19-piece big band, a big series of concerts, just 2 days, one day before the Grammys recently, the Friday and the Saturday before the Grammys. So the Jazz at Lincoln Center publicity people called me up and said, Bobby, you want us to do anything, in terms of publicity? He goes, I said, get me on the Letterman show. He goes, the Letterman show, man. He goes, what, or get me on Conan, whatever, and try to get me on any of those shows. So I go, yeah, but, right away, yeah, but. I says, what do you mean? I just sued the Grammys. I'm nominated in 2 categories. I'm from the Bronx in New York City. I'm a freaking New Yorican. They don't have to pay to fly in the band or anything. My band kicks ass. And he goes, it's a natural. He can ask me, and if, the band, I guarantee you, the band will kick ass. And the person at Nick Jazz at Lincoln Center, Scott Thompson, goes, damn, you're right. I know somebody at Letterman. So he emails the guy at Letterman. The guy knows me. He emails me and Scott at the same time, and he says, Bobby, I know who you are. I've seen you. You're amazing. Your band is amazing. But jazz for us is it's outside of our comfort zone. Especially, and Latin jazz, even more so. So I emailed them right away. I says, you know how many Latinos are in New York City, man? You know how many Latinos are in this country? Not in a nasty way or anything. I just, he goes, Bob, I know what you're saying, but, the people, the powers that be, it ain't gonna happen.
And at the same time, all those Latinos are not necessarily into jazz.
It doesn't matter. You educate them, just like they're not maybe into banda music, or they're not into, Esperanza Spalding. They don't even know who Esperanza Spalding is.
There was a total controversy when she got that Grammy that time. It was like, who?
Yeah, but now you know who she is.
Yeah, totally.
It's about education. And somebody taking that leap of faith and saying, Tito Puente didn't get on Letterman until how many Grammys did he win? And he was a senior citizen already. It's like ridiculous. So like I said, again, I can only speak from the jazz perspective. As I said before, when you knock on these doors, right, and you say jazz, it's like cancer. And the only reason Poncho Sanchez got on the old Arsenio Hall show was because one of the Chicano cameramen went up to Arsenio Hall and said, yo, check this out, man. He gave him a CD of Poncho Sanchez, and he loved it. And he said, who is this guy? Where does he? He goes, he lives here in L.A., man. He goes, let's book him. That's the only reason they got on the show. So what we need for the music from the jazz perspective is advocacy. And for all our artists, there's always a barrier. There's always a barrier. We need advocacy. A lot of the people that book these shows are 30-something, 20-something producers that don't even know what a trumpet is, don't even know what a trombone is or whatever. They've grown up completely culturally illiterate. And that's why you don't see any hip things anymore from a musical standpoint, in my opinion, on Saturday Night Live anymore. Now, if you don't know who Sunrise,
they're not even funny anymore.
Yeah, if you don't know who Sunrise,
Story altogether.
if you don't know who Sunrise is, Sunrise was a black gentleman named Sonny Blount who said that he came from Saturn, and his big band used to dress in space costumes and everything, and it was called the Orchestra, and he'd tell you he was from Saturn. He'd tell you straight up. And he's considered the first real true avant-gardist in jazz. They booked him on Saturday Night Live. I saw it. I couldn't believe it. And he marched into the audience and everything while some guy on stage was with a pyramid in his hands that was glowing in the dark, reciting some outside avant-garde poetry. It was amazing. You're not going to see that anymore because you know why? There's no more advocacy on that show because all those people, producers in those days, back then, were hip to jazz, were hip to artists outside of the norm and stuff. So it is true, you can get some things on shows, but if it doesn't meet the paradigm that they see, oh, it's alternative rock, it'll be cool, well, we'll play it or whatever. I can only speak from my perspective again. And as you can tell, I'm getting a little emotional about it because I am a jazz musician.
I just want to say that I think there's a lot of people that have success that have never been on Letterman or Conan or any of those late night shows, and tons of bands that are doing great that you've actually never heard of. They're on tour constantly that make lots of money. So, we shouldn't just complain about not getting. I mean, I want to be on Letterman. Hey.
I'm going to keep asking. I'm going to keep.
Hey, all you can do is ask.
Well, didn't Tito Puente made it there when he was like totally almost done?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It only
Like 70 already.
Yeah, why does that have to be? Why does that wall that barrier have to be? It's ridiculous, especially in 2013. So that's all I'm saying.
Chris, are we taking questions from the audience, or are we waiting until the end? Because I know some people have questions.
We could go either way. Let me follow up on one point, and then absolutely. No, let's take a question because I
want to hear you.
I've already forgotten my point.
Brenda had a question.
No, my I don't know if this is a follow-up question or not, but just a follow-up point maybe is that there's some interesting threads that are emerging here, to mix metaphors, of talking about the kind of paradigm shift that's happened away from things like record contracts in general and that sort of model, which several of you have described was quite a flawed model to begin with, and toward much more of a do-it-yourself kind of model, and toward a model of finding and engaging the different little microcultures, the different kind of, micro fan bases in different kinds of places, and how there's so much more, how there actually is a lot of room for a lot of different kinds of music right now, but it's kind of, everybody has to be behaving at a grassroots level, and I'm here with several people who are doing exactly that in different realms. I don't think that there's a question there, just a follow-up, but it's all the way in the back. There's microphones coming around here.
Hi, my name is Dr. Gene Marlowe. I'm a professor at Baruch College, also a colleague of that gentleman to your left, Bobby Sanabria. Plays in my quintet, the Heritage Ensemble. I have really two comments as opposed to a question. Number one, we should all go out and read Kabir Sigal's book, Jazzocracy, which really defines the role of the musician as an individual in the context of the group. That's real democracy. The second point I would like to make is I think, based on what you all were just saying, that there's a reason why these television programs don't take any risk. And the real reason is it's really strictly business. In the 1980s, there were 50 media companies in this country who owned 90% of the media assets. Today, that number is 6. And they're not interested in risk. They're interested in maximizing their profits. And that's why they're going to go mainstream, and that's why jazz and Latin jazz and real quality music, including classical, has been marginalized. They want to make their money back because they're putting millions, tens of millions of dollars into television programs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's the reason for it.
It's a sad case on what's going on today. The New York Opera House just closed because they couldn't get the monies. I mean,
bankrupt.
you're talking about old school music here. That's one of them, and that they had to close down because the funding. That's incredible.
Phil, you had a question?
Hi, I'm Phil Bowman. I actually work here, so I'm a little bit of a ringer. But I have a question. So, in talking about Latin music, and Bobby said there's 22 countries in Latin America. I don't know if you're including the Caribbean too. So there's a vast diversity of cultures.
It's 22 Spanish-speaking countries.
Right, and then if you include Brazil and all the different, so it's very diverse. And even here on the panel, the range of styles and music is very, very diverse. And so I'm kind of curious, especially Yuzzy and Sandra may have more to say about this, that how are you guys finding the response from audiences, and can you speak to this rich diversity of music, of Latin music and Spanish music, and is it finding audiences in America aside from these mainstream channels of big TV and major institutional frameworks and support? Because I know you guys are active and busy. I kind of would like to hear more about how the kind of response that you get from people outside, Mexican Americans or people from the border or people that are familiar with Venezuelan or Colombian music. Maybe you guys could talk about that a little.
I think it depends on what kind of concepts the bands are proposing. Like, let's say, for instance, on the Latin alternative side, I see that there's some, I mean, I'm experiencing this problematic in the past 2 years that I'm starting to notice that bands that kind of try to sound like, I don't know, like Radiohead or like something that's sort of similar or a copy of that, don't necessarily have an impact, or they don't have the opportunity to cross over as much, because as far as the English-speaking people, they're like, you know, why do I want to listen to the copy of Radiohead if I can just listen to them, you know? And then there is a curious thing that on the English-speaking side, on those bands that they call world music, which even the world music community sort of hate the term, but anybody who speaks English thinks that anything that's in another language, I don't know, everything is world music. So they just put it there. We're all world music here. So those people that basically propose concepts where there is still a modern sounding, you know, mix, but with the folklore of the place that they come from, and they actually are able to fuse that as a new concept, then you do see interest and people wanting to cover it and people wanting to dance with it and people wanting to be a part of it. And there is a huge community nationwide that wants to book these bands, they want to talk about these bands, they want to sponsor these bands. One of our colleagues, Mr. Bill Brigham, who unfortunately is not here, who's been a huge advocate for, you know, for this kind of music. He created this annual amazing festival. It started super little, Global Fest.
We were
which
with
is
him last year
expanding.
in France.
And they did, for instance, he did something amazing that he started associating with the South by Southwest and with all the rest of the festivals, and creating an event there that says, you know, these are the bands that we're advocating. Come and see them. Invited all the, you know, basically, we're all the New York crew basically working all these things, and because as everybody who's been there, this place is like packed with, there's too much stuff going on that you just can't do everything at the same time. So we tried to sort of narrow it down, and it was an absolute success. All our bands were like featured by the side of like Nick Cave and all the all the Anglo and British performers that everybody else was seeing, we were right next to them. And then there were the Latin alternative bands that still, they sounded great, and I went and rocked out to a bunch of those, but they went, there was about maybe half of the audience was there, they loved it, but they went and they left and nothing happened. And the other issue was that I have a couple of those bands that sound like the Radioheads of the world, and I was just like, okay, what the hell am I gonna do? Do I bring him to United States? Is anybody gonna come and see them? And I literally made the decision to skip bringing everybody to the United States, because do I really want to spend all this money to have basically 25 of my friends come and see these bands, or should I go to Mexico where they actually really root for this kind of music and where there's actually a market for it? So that is the problematic at this point for modern sounding bands, that if you want to work within the English-speaking world with the English promoters, with the Anglo publications and stuff, you do have to have propose a concept that still has that's rooty, but it's still modern, that is still dancey. Everybody just wants to dance because we're all so depressed. So, I just want to dance. Just take me to this thing. And I had this amazing band from Brussels that was called La Chiva Antigua, which is the one that I took to South by Southwest. And man, you should see all those really oldie gringos, man, and they're like all pulling for it.
Why did you look at me just now?
I don't know why. But it was, that is what they're looking for. They're looking for something that's just making them feel alive. And when they have something that's really forceful, then, people will go for that. But
to answer your question, Phil, I think people want to hear good music.
Yeah.
I don't care what you call it. I don't care where it's from.
Yeah.
I don't really want to hear Radiohead in another language. I'll just listen to Radiohead. I totally get it. And for us, for Pistolera, it definitely helped to brand ourselves as world music, which it's kind of...
gave you more opportunities.
It's a gimmick, honestly. It's like, we're all in the world. Are we not? What other music is there besides world music?
Michael Jackson is world music.
Sun Ra.
Apparently, there's Sun Ra.
music.
Yeah.
Except for Sunra, he's from Saturn.
He's from a different planet. But certainly in the beginning we called ourselves a Latin alternative band, and then that kind of got old because what does that really mean? And
playing the LAMC.
Yeah, been there, done that. So we branding ourselves as a world music band allowed us to play all these international festivals, Global Fest being one of them, which opened many doors for us, which allowed us to tour in Mexico and in Europe and in Canada. And it brings up so many issues of authenticity. Some people are really... I'll tell you a story. We were on tour in Belgium, and we played a show, and this woman came up to me afterwards and said, "Where in Mexico are you from?" And I said, "I'm from San Diego." She said, "You're not a real Mexican person." And I said, "Lady, I'm so sorry to let you down. Did you like the show?"
No, but San Diego was part of Mexico at one time.
I wasn't going to get into it with her, but the point being is that some people, everyone comes to the music for different reasons, and there's definitely some people that want to hear just traditional music. They want to go to the show that they know they're going to be able to dance to the whole thing. They're going to dance, and that's why they go. And then there's other people that want to go listen to lyrics, and there's, whatever. And you don't have to be... What makes it Latin music? Is it because you can dance to it? Is it because I'm Latin and I'm playing the music? What if I play rock and I'm still Latin? Well, now am I playing rock, or am I playing Latin rock, or what? So I think there's what?
Please tell us.
I think there's a lot of successful, indie rock artists, for example, that incorporate singing in Spanish or Latin elements into their music, but never branded themselves as Latin alternative music.
I think that's
I think that's the way to go, honestly, because it just opens. It keeps everything open. It just says so-and-so, what's his name? Devendra Bernhardt, is a Venezuelan American singer-songwriter, and he can collaborate with Natalia Lafourcade, or he can also go on some indie rock tour and, have success. And it's never branded as Latin rock, you know.
And Natalia Clavier, for instance, like she's the singer for Thievery Corporation. She's Argentinian, and nobody had any idea that that she was Latin American. And same with Devendra, and I think that
Or
if you
Helado Negro,
nationalize
you know.
yourself, you kind of like you're kind of putting a wall for everybody to say, well, I don't connect with what you're saying. I mean, I think it is important to just focus on the music and not focus on the language and not focus on your nationality or something, because some people might find that a little bit repellent,
Or you might paint yourself into a niche, into a wall.
Yes.
Which you don't want to do, which is what I said at the beginning. I think all of us have all these elements of being political and all that, but I think what stands the test of time is how honest you are with your music.
Well,
Whether it's
good
something
song, the
that's-
proof is in the pudding. It's
Yeah.
either good or it's not good. I don't care where you're from or what you call it, or you know what I mean, like how oppressed you are. It's like
The proof
it's
is in
either the proof is in the pudding. It's either a good song or it's not a good song, and let's move on. You know.
And I think that comes from the artists themselves, from their own honesty. What are they putting out there?
This is, Duke Ellington said that a long time
Yeah.
ago, right? There's only two kinds of music in
Good
the
and
world.
bad,
Good
yeah.
music
Yeah.
and bad music.
And just to riff on what Yuzzy said, there's great things happening there. There are people that are advocates for us that, like Bill Berrigan, like I don't know if she's here, Erica Elliott at Soundstage, that are doing incredible things, and they're taking the mantle of Bill Graham, who used to run the Fillmore East and West and used to manage Santana and when he was alive, the Grateful Dead and a bunch of other groups, Blue Oyster Cult and all these other groups. And Bill was a mambo Nick. He when he was a kid in Europe, he was in a Nazi death camp, escaped with his sister, comes to the Bronx, grows up listening to Afro-Cuban music, blues, jazz, and he loved all this. And
He was the worst waiter in the Catskills,
Yeah.
but the best mambo dancer.
Yeah. And he says, my philosophy is give them what they want. They want to hear something that I don't like, I'll give it to them. But at the same time, I'm going to give them something of what they need. So what he used to do at the Fillmore East and West, he'd do a thing like, tonight, the Grateful Dead. And who's the opening act? The Woody Herman Big Band. And people would tell him, what are you, crazy, man? He goes, nah, man, I'll give them the Grateful Dead, but I'm going to give them what they need, too. This is a great artist. They need to hear this gentleman play clarinet and his great big band. Now, at the same time, Woody Herman's not going to play the music that he did in the 1940s. What he would program jazz rock music that was very, very contemporary and hip. So others that did that were Buddy Rich with his big band. It was like, so that kind of promoter, that kind of cultural warrior, like those kind of cultural warriors like Bill and Erica, I've worked with them. They're fantastic. The whole common denominator, as Sandra and Yuzzy said, is it good? Is it good? And will it entertain? Will it entertain because it has to be entertaining. And I've learned that over the years as a musician. So you have to entertain the people and stuff. And if it's dance music and all Latin music, whatever form it could be, Colombian cumbia, it could be Mexican rancheras, it could be tonadas from Ecuador, and of course, salsa from Puerto Rico and Cuba. It's all dance.
What if it's rock?
That too. You know who danced? I went to my first Grateful Dead concert 9 years ago.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
That wasn't-
Because of my wife.
Oh.
Elena, she's a deadhead. And I'm there at Jones Beach, and I'm going, and all of a sudden, people are going like this, like in this, that, and then I'm going, okay, well, it isn't dancing mambo on two, but it is dancing, They're feeling it.
The crystal dance.
Yeah.
Is there going to be an argument about whether to dance to the dead on one or two?
No.
No.
With Sun Ra, maybe, but.
But that's a more sanitized dead. That wasn't the real dead.
Well,
the one I know.
I know what you're saying, but the cloud of smoke that was around, and I'm not going to
The
say what it
purple
was.
haze was gone, man. It's not
It
the
helped a
same
little.
thing.
It helped a little.
Not the same thing. Anyway.
But it's great, and you should check out, especially what happened in Summer Stage this year, this past summer, because it was dedicated to the 40th anniversary of hip hop, And
It was amazing.
but there were other great events happening that weren't related at all to hip hop. And the last concert I played it a few weeks ago with Larry Harlow, because I played timbales with his band, Larry Harlow's Latin Legends band. Everybody's a leader in that band, an all-star. And I said, coño, you know, nobody's gonna really come to the freaking place was like, I'm going, oh man, it's like the Yankee Stadium concert with the Fania All-Stars. And Larry was very, very happy because, you know, he's, you know, you're writing a book with him on his life. He talks about this music is dying, this, that, and it was an affirmation that the music is still alive. We did a concert, Bill did the concert 2 years ago with Larry doing the salsa suite. And Larry goes to me, listen, you know, and Bill, you know, he's a businessman too. He's go, this is the amount of money we have. We can't do it with anything else. So Larry calls me up and says, look, we're gonna do the salsa. I want your big band to be the core band, and we're gonna have a 14-piece string section. And I go, what's the bread? And when he tells me the bread, I said, Larry, man, you gotta be kidding me, man. And I called Bill, I said, Bill, you know, what's up? You know, and he says, this is what we got, Bobby. You know, what is it? And Ruben is doing it for free because Ruben Blades is doing it for free because Larry helped him in his career. I said,
That was his payback.
yeah. So he goes, so I talked to my musicians, let's do it because we're gonna have a platform to get our music across, and we had like 18,000 people there. It was we broke every record of Lincoln Center. You know, some people say we're 20,000 people.
That was the same day that Ruben was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so hard to get in.
That was 2010.
But still.
2010, yeah. There
Yeah.
were 15,000 people.
So the deal was, Bobby, warm up the crowd. You do a set with your big band, and so me as the musician, I'm thinking, let's play all this esoteric, you know. I go, no, I got to play something that relates to the people and everything. And besides, the arrangements are esoteric to begin with, but I have to pick things that people will move and groove to. So me, as a performer, has a responsibility also to my audience. You dig? So we had that place, we pumped the crowd up, and we had that place going crazy. And you know who was in the audience? All these Latino stars, Valdemar Reyes, all these, you know, and because of that, they know who I am now. And Ruben comes up to me afterwards and he goes, oye, esa banda que tú tienes está encendida. You know, he starts talking to me. Who's your manager? I go, well, it's the firm of me, myself, and I. You know? So I said, he gives me his email, so hopefully we're going to collaborate on something soon. But that was because of Bill and because of Larry and because they're forward-thinking, et cetera. So we need more, and that's what when I'm talking about advocacy, those people are advocates. We need more people like that across the world.
But Bill and Erica also have the most important quality of all is that they're actual music fans.
Yeah.
They love music before the business and
Yeah.
before anything. They
Bill
love
is a
music,
trumpet
and
player.
that is the people that you have to work with.
Bill
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
trumpet player.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
He
he's
just
a-
loves music.
And he's a DJ too.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
so he's got a DJ name. Yeah. So
DJ Acidophilus is part of Globe
Sonic.
Sonic.
Happy that we're all talking about him all the time.
yeah. So I think Erica was supposed to be here, but it would have been great to have her speak on this. But this is what we need: advocates that are forward thinking. And when I mean advocates, I mean that they love the music, they love the artist, they love. You know, if it was somebody else, they go, what? You know, like I have a big band playing, you know, Latin jazz. You know, get out of here, man. We're not going to. Let's get a salsa band to warm up the crowd. No. Bill said to me, do what you want, man. You know what to do. Just do what you want. Do what you want. I know it's going to be good.
Bill Reagan actually gave me the first concert I ever produced in New York City a long time ago. He was the first one that actually gave me the chance and said, I will give you the club and you do your first show at the risk of totally failing, which I didn't, but eventually I did a show that maybe 20 people showed up or something.
Was that at Joe's Pub? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he took a chance.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, yeah, man, I'll just do it. Go and produce a show. And if he wouldn't have done that, I mean, it would have been very difficult. He does support people that start out. And if you have an opportunity, please look for Bill Reagan.
And Erica, you know what Erica's into? Her favorite type of music? She's a hip-hop head from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But she loves jazz. She was the one that produced the whole Charlie Parker Jazz Festival this year in the summer.
Just a quick advertisement. Bill Bragan is coming to my Eyes of Entrepreneurs course on tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It's free upstairs.
Open to the public, too.
Well, tell him we said hello.
Tell him we
His
love
puppet?
him.
Is he bringing his puppet?
Oh, I like his
Bilmo?
Bilmo?
Bilmo.
I haven't.
I love Bilmo.
I haven't seen that, but I
love
think I don't want to see it.
No, it's cute. It's really awesome. It's
looks
really
just like
cute.
him.
Well, tell him we love him. Hey, tell
looks
him
just
thank
like
you.
him.
Tell him thank you.
But see, those are only a few people. And there's so much music and so much talent out there.
There are out there.
But
And what's,
those are the two that we know of here.
yeah, but that's why you got to go out more, man.
But, okay, but my point, what I'm trying to say is, as an artist today,
We're all hanging with you tonight. You know.
yeah, but my point is, as an artist today, there are opportunities, but you have to make those opportunities.
Yes.
You have to go out there and find them. Nobody will hire you. Find somebody, get your monies together, pull the family together, rent a place, promote it, and do your own show. It could be as simple or as hard as that. But the thing is, there are opportunities. We have the tools today that we can do that as artists and make those opportunities for ourselves. So I think it's a bigger playing field. There's so much more diversity. Plus, as an artist, you have an opportunity to keep more of what you make. Where back in the day, okay, you could have been famous, but Bobby can tell you a lot of these guys, even Tito Puente, did not make any kind of money until they were much older. Tito Puente didn't buy his first house until he got his royalty statement from Carlos Santana, Oye Como Va.
That's right. That's right.
And he was working all those years. So many of these artists in the salsa world, a lot of them died in poverty. Ruben Blades is one of the few who's a millionaire. Gilberto Santa Rosa, maybe Victor Manuel.
He didn't
but-
make his money from music.
No, he
He did
didn't.
from Hollywood.
He did. That's right.
So-
That's right. And he didn't even make it from there.
Musician means that you're going to be eating a lot of bologna and bread.
Well, that comes back to
Comiendo mierda.
that
Yeah,
comes back to
the proper
advocacy
term.
too.
Bologna in hand.
That comes back to advocacy too. Now we're talking about musicians advocating for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think
And-
that is, I mean, by my
That's what I've
company,
done.
for instance,
That's what I've done.
basically based on that. Is based on artists saying, okay, there's no label that's going to sign me. There's no agent that's going to book my shows or something. So how do I get to these things? And basically, I build their campaigns, and I work with them, and I find them their agents, and I find them their record deals, or market their whole thing and do their publicity and whatever. And things happen. We actually got a Grammy doing it by ourselves with one of my artists.
Great.
See?
years ago,
See?
you know?
I think that
You don't
deserves an
need to
applause.
be-
That deserves an applause. Because people all think they need a whole team of people, and that deserves an
That's
applause.
nice.
Yes.
There's not a whole team. It's just me. Honey.
That's what I'm
It's just me.
saying. That's just you. That's what I'm saying.
And for instance,
And a woman. All right.
I never thought
Absolutely.
of myself. I think when you start thinking of yourself as a woman or as a minority or something, like you're setting yourself up to be objectified.
I don't think so, because I think the world out there objectifies us to begin with, and secondly, we are women, and I'm proud of being a woman. And yes, it is a man's world. And those women that break through, I'm proud of them, because it is a man's world. And I don't think you set up. I think you have to be clear. You will have those obstacles because you're a woman, because there's certain precepts. And this whole society is built like that. So I don't agree with that. I don't think of a minority or that we're less than. I think I'm just as equal. And I think we belong there, side by side with the guys.
That might be a generational thing, maybe, because in my case, I've never had anybody like, you're a woman and you're this or something. I came in to rule.
You know why? Because we paved the way. They won't say it to your face. They won't say it to your face.
Yeah, they will never say
We
it.
paved the way already. That's why.
They will never.
You're very lucky.
I am.
Very lucky.
They will never say it to your face.
No, they won't.
I didn't finish the conversation with the gentleman from NBC. You know, he said, "I've seen you, Bob. I've seen you at Dizzy's. I've seen you." He was there at the concert with Ruben Blades that we did 2 years ago at Lincoln Center Outdoors. I know you forget it. I love your music. You know, I have it on my iPod or whatever. You know, but the whole thing was we had. You know, that's our side. I got the email. I should frame it. Jazz and in particular Latin jazz. It's outside of our comfort zone. So that's code for telling me that it's cancer. You know, and when there ain't no way that we're gonna have that, because we think that if that music gets on the air, the TV switch is gonna go off. Meanwhile, if we got on that show and played, people would be in shock. Just like when I was shocked when I was a kid and I saw the Buddy Rich big band on the, you know, when I saw Buddy Rich on the Johnny Carson show playing the shit out of jazz drums with a big band, and I'm going, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, you know? So you have to have, like I said, you have to have people in your corner, advocacy. And I'm always knocking on doors and you know, breaking down, you know, whatever. I'll kick it, I'll do whatever. We're going to play at Dizzy's Club Coca-Cola November 21st to the 24th with my big band for headlining. Who do you think? I'm going to speak to Jenny Wasserman next week about publicity for the event. What's the first thing out of my mouth is going to be? Jenny, get me on Letterman, man. And she's going to go to me, wow, yeah, you know, oh yeah, I don't think, just try, and or any of the other shows. I'm really big on that. You just keep knocking. You know, that old blues song, keep on knocking, but you can't come in, keep on knocking, but you can't come in. Eventually they'll open the door. So, yeah, go ahead. No. The protest is the music, man. You know, like, but the thing is, look, the other thing about labeling, I want to follow up on what you said. It's very, very important that in terms of the world of marketing, I don't like to call what I do Latin jazz, because there are so many other elements in the music that I do that calling it Latin jazz is like almost a disservice to what we do. So my wife turned me on to the writings of the great Mexican poet and writer Octavio Paz, and then he talks about the multiverse, that the best civilizations have always been combinations of different cultures, but each one of those cultures not being, you know, absorbed in it's like in a broth that's tasteless, but each one of them standing out and contributing to each other. So when people ask me now, what do? I say, well, I do multiverse music, man. And when people ask me what I am, I don't even say I'm a New York Puerto Rican anymore. I'm from the multiverse. And that's hip, because you know what? It opens up a conversation, just like Sunrise saying, I'm from Saturn, man. You know?
You should be Sonra's publicist.
He's dead.
We have another ringer with a question.
Well, I'm Pam Saber, and I work at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music with the amazing Bobby Sanabria and others in the room. And I can't resist an opportunity to share with you that we do have a Sun Ra orchestra at the New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music.
Yes, indeed.
If you're curious about hearing that music live after you come see the Afro-Cuban Jazz Orchestra another night, come on back for Sun Ra. But apropos to our thinking tonight about the future of our music, we work, you know, with so many talented young people who come to New York in pursuit of their training and their dream of being professional musicians. And it's such a struggle. I mean, New York is not a welcoming, forgiving place for young people, young people without means. And I just wondered if you feel there are other testing grounds, other cities, other places right now that, you know, are exciting for young people and a little bit more, but they're not, you know, that have been on your radar, that you're seeing developing?
Berlin.
Berlin does. One of my current artists actually comes from Berlin. Did a record that was actually called Berlin and stuff, and you know, he's from Argentinian parents, and there is a really hot scene going on there. Sweden, it also has something going on. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on in Germany, but they're like huge for Latin music right now. Brussels, I think it's more, Europe is kind of like really getting into Latin music more. I mean, in Latin America, South America, Central America, I mean, it's like the everyday. But in Europe, it is kind of strange. But they even have this amazing festival in Germany called the Fusion Festival, man, and they're always like chasing bands from Latin bands, Latin jazz bands, and everything. Because they buy records, they buy tickets. I don't know what it is, because I asked, like, is there radios? Is there press? I don't know how it's getting there, but it is a big place.
I would.
Well, your comment, your answers to that, I think, just enlighten just the sad point of view what's going on in this country. When Bobby says, I want to get on David Letterman, yes, it's true. That shouldn't be the be-all end-all. A Grammy shouldn't be the be-all end-all, because if you're a great musician, it shouldn't matter. But the fact that European audiences are more educated about it because they know about it. You're never going to see good music on, my opinion, good music on Saturday Night Live or Letterman, and the people don't get educated. But in Europe, they have educated audiences. People go over there. They don't even call salsa. They call it Latin, Cuban son, because they really know what it is over there. You can get, good Cuban music, all kinds of different Latin music, all kinds of, jazz music all over Europe, because they're educated. And I think if we had more mainstream exposure, you don't have to be mainstream. You could do festival circuit and do other circuits and do really well and have a great underground following. But to educate our people about this, it would be nice to get some mainstream exposure, and I think that's really important.
Well, just to riff on what you said, in terms of places, Holland is really big into all things Latin, not just Cuban music, Puerto Rican music, Argentinian tango. I was artist in residence about 14 years ago at the the Rotterdam Conservatoire. So they show me around the school. They take me to a class, a guitar class, and what are they doing? They're transcribing Arsenio Rodriguez Tres Solos, the mandolin of Cuba. I go to another class, it's called tango, the national music of Argentina, and there's a teacher showing them about tango music, and they have an ensemble there, and they're playing tango music, and I'm going, wait a minute, what the? So I said, this is just an anomaly. I go to another class, they're showing them cumbia, and he goes, and I said, well, why is this happening? I talked to the head of the conservatoire. Oh, we have a degree in Latin American music. That you study for 4 years, you have to take a stringent examination. It's not just Cuban music, you have to learn Puerto Rican, Argentinian, Venezuelan, joropo, all this stuff. And I'm going, wait a minute, something is wrong here. And then I go to places like Hamburg, Germany, same thing. People are studying the music, people are playing the music, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very surprising. Japan has incorporated Latin music in their.
Japan is they're huge.
Orquesta de la Luz.
Yeah.
To underscore what we're talking about now, I was in Europe over the summer in London and Paris, partly for family, but with the express purpose of going to the jazz clubs to write about them for my blog. And went to several clubs in London, a few clubs in Paris, and in the main, the most effective groups were those who had incorporated Latin rhythms all over the place. And there's now a club in London. It's Pizza something, and it's
right.
And they've just started a Latin jazz
Pizza
festival.
Express, it's called.
Pizza Express. I was there, and they've just started a Latin jazz.
But
festival.
what we're hearing here is that here in New York, here in the U.S., if you don't go outside of U.S., I mean, that's what we're saying here.
Oh, wait for the microphone, please.
Hi. Berkeley School of Music is doing a tremendous job in an outreach in South America and now going to Europe. And there's a lot of students that are coming from different countries to study jazz here. I'm talking basically jazz. But they also, I find that music to me should be taught as a whole. It's not jazz is contemporary American music. and we have to study those that came before us, learn the language, learn music, learn the ABCs, and then, and do your thing. And the whole idea of Hispanic, the title of this thing, Hispanic Music, Present and Future, to me, when I looked at it, I really, it wasn't very clear. And it's not, and that was a question that I wanted to, like, what does it mean?
Welcome to the club.
Really, and I'm not putting it down because I deal with this all the time. Aside from singing and, how you describe me, that's just an aspect. I've been producing and managing for the last 30 years. I was Chico Farrell's representative for many years. I produced for television and for radio commercials. I did millions of jingles. I did a lot. I contracted Ruben Blades did a lot of commercials on television, for us, and so on and so forth. But I'm saying, we have to put all this together because a lot of the things that you were saying, and it's fascinating. I don't know a lot of that music, and what you were saying. I mean, I kind of, but we're all lumped together.
Yes.
And we are so many things. This is why I think that in my musical experiences, we reach out to everybody that speak Spanish, and we all kind of, but we all don't eat rice and beans. We really don't.
Or just because we speak the same language doesn't mean we like the same music.
Yeah, and there's so many nuances and so on, but it's fascinating. But we're all put together, and I produce a lot of things, and I think that, that whole marketing, talking about Saturday Night Live jazz. I have this guy that works in my office whose brother-in-law is a producer there. So I said, can we write? It's the same thing. Although Paquito did many, many years ago, about 25 years ago, he did do, what's his name, the Letterman show. But they put him at the last thing with the credits coming down. It was terrible. I could have, it was just, but this is the way they treat us.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Let's get rid of the cancer like right away,
but let me tell you, the musicians certainly know. All of those musicians know the music, and a lot of them are, they love jazz. It's who sells, and what you can sell, and that's why. So this guy wrote a note that he sent, and I saw it, and it's the same thing as how commercial. Of course, everybody knows. So of course they know, you're great musicians. They just want to know, can you sell? Are you really, that big? Do you project to a general public for pop? Basically, that's what it is. They're promoting, and it's a terrible thing. So we have to keep insisting. But that's going back to we'll keep insisting. But that is somebody saying no. You can't put a jazz musician because they're not really going to draw anything.
And yet, with all that's going on the scene, that there's nothing going on in New York, Europe is where it's happening, and all of that. In my orchestra, one of our trumpet players came from Cuba 5 years ago. And there's a musician here today. I just met him, Ivan Yanis, back here. He's from Cuba. He's been here 2 years, a singer and a drummer. They're not going to Europe. They're coming here. Why? You would think if there's no industry, well, maybe they should go to Japan or go to Germany. But no, they're here because they're still, if you don't make it here, you don't make it anywhere.
Right.
Yesterday, Chano Dominguez, Brenda, I'm moving to the United States. We've been telling, come on over. There ain't nothing happening. Really, I mean, I'm just telling you, it's a lot of things going on.
We got to make it happen.
We are doing things in the United States, and I think that we really have to unite together. And I think that the things that we're involved in is bringing in all of the elements that make Latin culture into the jazz language, which is the democratic language, and it brings everything in. It makes it powerful, and that's what we're dealing with, and that's what I like.
Right. Just to reinforce your point, look, everything in the jazz world is downscaled from the pop, rock, music mainstream world. Everything from record sales, CD sales, to concerts, to everything else. So the music that somebody would call, for lack of a better term, Latin jazz, is even more marginalized. When I get those emails about the Latin American Alternative Music Conference, I crack up because I said, "What's the most alternative music there is, man? Latin jazz." And the first year I got it, I called up and I said, "Hey, you have anything featuring Latin-oriented jazz?" He goes, "No, this is more for rock, pop, rock, this, that, alternative music, this, that." I started laughing, but. And getting back to your point about Berkeley, In 1975, I was the first Puerto Rican student at the Berklee College of Music. I couldn't believe it. It was me, 3 Brazilians, 1 Argentinian. I graduated in 1979. Now at Berklee, the largest population of students are students from Latin America. The largest population. When I was there, it was a ghost town. In fact, I told Charlie Palmieri, Eddie Palmieri's older brother, I said, Maestro, they don't know who you are. They don't know who Tito Puente is. Nobody on the faculty knew it. He goes to me, kid, you got to remember one thing. Once you go up I-95 and start driving and you get past New Haven, Connecticut, people start going, Tito who? You know? Now, things are a lot different. And in jazz education, I think this is one of the things that I'm going to harp on for the rest of my life. People in jazz education, all these universities, including this one, including, you know, the other institution that I teach at, in Berklee, they owe a responsibility to the students to, as advocates for the music, to give them opportunities to perform. So my alma mater, Berklee, who I love, you know, I always speak highly of them and everything, they got all this money, they got satellite schools in Spain, they got them in South America, they got, how come, what are they doing to get these kids work? Why don't they build a club in these places? They could certainly do it, because Berklee is becoming, unfortunately, like McDonald's, unfortunately. We do as much as we can here at the new school. We have concerts here, but we need to do more in terms of getting the word out that these great ensembles are doing concerts here. I do the most I can, and I thank the administration for supporting me. We play during the school year, the last Sunday of the month, at the New York Poets Cafe. But we need more advocacy for these young students, because these kids are coming up to me, Mr. Sanabria, I owe $50,000. I owe $80,000 in tuition. I go, what do I do? I tell them, listen, man, if the circus comes into town and they offer you a gig, take it, man. I don't know what to tell you. I used to be able to tell my students years ago, their parents, Mrs. Santiago, don't worry. Mrs. Weinstein, don't worry. Your son or daughter has learned their craft well, and they've learned their craft. They'll be able to make a living at music. I can't tell them that anymore. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with that, and it goes back to advocacy in terms of changing the paradigm of the way people in the United States look at musicians, because most people do not respect musicians anymore. And I have nothing against DJs, but they'll respect a DJ more than a musician. And that's wrong. That is wrong. That is totally wrong. And I have many friends that are DJs. That is totally the antithesis of what should be happening.
I have to say, I agree with you on that. When we performed at Lincoln Center 2 years ago, I remember I went on Remezcla, and they had the DJ. They didn't even have our band. And we were there with Larry Harlow, with this whole Fania All-Star setup. And I called them and I said, wait a minute. All you have on that night is DJ Termix? I mean, what happened to the band? What happened? Then, I couldn't believe that they did that. I said, okay, that's fine. But yeah, that's what's happening today. But I do believe that as musicians, we have a lot more control right now of what we can do. And we do have to be, there are the advocates out there, but I think we have to be our own advocates out there. We have to go out there, just like you sued the Grammys and you got them to bring back Latin jazz. And there are sacrifices to be made, but I think we have to make those sacrifices. And by the way, just since we're shamelessly plugging events here, we'll be playing next Sunday.
I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed.
No, I said our upcoming events. So we have an upcoming event next Sunday over at the Queens Center Mall, where we're going to have our 13-piece orchestra, and we have 2 guest artists, Larry Harlow and Chocolate Almenteros, who's considered the 85-year-old Louis Armstrong of the Afro-Cuban trumpet. And we have the extra added guests of the 2 Latino dancers from Dancing with the Stars. So that's your mainstream kind of media hook, together with the old school music. And of course, we have the rock in the band too. So that's next Sunday. That's at 6 p.m. It's free to everybody. If you can come down and check us out. There's still a lot of good music here in New York, whether it's Latin jazz, whether it's salsa, whether it's a fusion of salsa, whether it's the New World music. whatever it is, there are Latinos making music. There was a point that I wanted to get into that I saw on the emails, and we didn't get into it, but there was a great thread about, do we make music for Latinos? Do we go beyond Latinos? Are Latinos making music for Latinos, or the other way around? And we didn't get a chance to talk about that. I thought that was interesting. But
I think we'll have to save that for the follow-up panel.
yeah, I was looking forward to that because I wanted to hear their point of view on that, especially since she's out there doing that a lot more. So I wanted to see. Not a union house. No, but well.
We're pretty close to running out of time, but we're not completely out of time yet.
What was the question?
It was the thread that you had put in the email about Latinos. Are we performing to other Latinos?
I think
that was me. Yeah.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was about, Latin people making Latin music for other Latin people, or for who. And I mean, I think it just all comes down to just because it's, first of all, just because it's Latin music doesn't mean that it's good. Number two, people like what they like, So I've had other friends of mine who are musicians who are Latino but aren't necessarily making Latin music, quote unquote, and they've asked me, how do I reach the Latin market? And I'm like, I have no idea. I think that people like the music that they like, and you can't, just because you're Latino and you're making music does not mean that you should instantly have a Latino following.
You shouldn't be cashing in on your Latino background at all.
I would say I could probably speak to that a bit too, as a non-Latino who has spent most of his career playing Latin music.
So you're Latino soul.
Hey, look at Larry Harlow. Look at Chris Washburn. They're
exactly, by manufactured identity or something along those lines. It's like these lines are there to be questioned if they exist at all.
Well, I think the question is, getting back to the Buddy Richards, but music is love, and you love the music. So why, I'm going, you said I'm going to play this because I love it. So that's it. I'm a Puerto Rican from the projects in the South Bronx. I love jazz. I saw Count Basie when I was on the Ed Sullivan Show when I was a kid. I said, "Wow, playing Whirly Bird." I said, "Man, that's what I want to be. I want to somehow be in that mix. Doing something. I don't know what, but
But I think in the end, as an artist, any kind of artist, if when you play music, or when you put your art out there, you're not doing it just for your family or your friends or the people on the block. You want everybody to hear it. At least I would. I want everybody. I don't, oh no, I just made this for my friends over here. I mean, I think we want everyone to, and then when everyone accepts it, what is it? It belongs to everybody. It's not Latin music anymore. It's not the world music. It belongs to everybody. And I think every artist has that they have a message, and they want to bring this message to the world, not just, but then we put borders around it, we put cultural borders, and people are going to do that. There's national pride, but I think at the end, we make music for everybody, and we want the world to embrace it and love it. At least that's what I think.
I can't think of a better closing statement than that.
yeah.
I would like to thank our panelists. This was a wonderful conversation. And thank you all for coming. And the other folks who helped out make this happen.